Hello, and welcome to the Aboriginal AIDS Awareness Week virtual gathering. My name is Sarah Burch, and I am the Women's Community Development Coordinator at Positive Living Niagara. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land we are occupying here in the Niagara region and also offer a statement of solidarity. We acknowledge the land upon which we gather as the shared traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee people and Anishinaabe peoples, protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt. This historic peace agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and allied nations represents a commitment to share and protect the land, water, plants, and animals with respect. We wish to honor the original peoples of this land and express gratitude for the opportunity and the privilege to work with communities across this territory. The parallels between the Black Lives Matter movement and the ongoing fight for justice for Indigenous people in Canada and around the world cannot be ignored. Both are reminders of Canada's shameful history of colonialism and racism, which still exists today in many forms and contributes to the disproportionate impact of HIV on BIPOC communities. We at Positive Living Niagara believe in diversity and inclusivity. We commit to a culture of inclusion. We add our voice to the call for change. Radical equality matters. Upholding basic human rights matters. Doing what is right matters. Black lives matter. Today and always, we stand in solidarity. Now I would like to invite Jackie Labonte to open with a few words.
Segos Ganagoga, the Gayadakwas Onkyat, so Hondo, Galiwadegwa, Ah Nawala Ganikahage. We offer our humble prayers through our words and with the medicine that we have burning here for everyone that's gathered for this special event. So with our medicines, and especially from our hearts, that we offer up our humble gratitudes of prayer. And so we thank Senyawa Miigwech to all of our grandfathers and grandmothers from yesterday, from the ones today, and for the ones in our future days ahead. We offer the gratitude also for the winds, the earth, the fire, and the waters. Also looking at those four directions, we bring our minds together and turn to the east for the gift of enlightenment that opens our minds, removing the poisons that sometimes creeps in, replacing it with clarity and honesty. We turn to the south for the direction of renewal, innocence, and rebirth that teaches us we can start life anew. We turn to the west for the gift of introspection so that we might reflect and act on that which comes from the center of our souls. We turn to the north for the gift of wisdom that teaches us to have faith and trust in all living things and nurtures our own gift of wisdom. We say Nyawa Miigwech, thank you to the animals who teach us about perseverance and the joys of being silly. We say Nyawa Miigwech, thank you to the elders who teach us that all negative things, hatred, greed, prejudice, envy, these are all the products of fear. And by walking this good road, we can cast those aside. We say Nyawa Miigwech, thank you, Songwandiso, for each new day with its gifts of love and knowledge. Help us to be in this beautiful gathering of energies, that we have our minds and our hearts open, and help us to live a good life and to listen and to have that good energy for each other. We say Nyawa Donato.
Jackie, thank you so much for your words and for starting us off in a good way. Now we are going to show the film Strong Medicine, followed immediately by an interview with local Indigenous HIV activist, Trevor Stratton, who is also featured in the film Strong Medicine.
Ceremony, Indigenous spirituality, philosophy, healing practices, all of those things keep my spirit alive. Our original teachings told us we should give thanks.
I wake up in the morning and I just have to be so grateful and thankful that I'm alive.
I'm 55, I could live more than 100.
My treatment now, it's part of my celebration in my journey. It's my celebration of my life. Getting tested and getting on treatment will save your life.
My spirit needs a vehicle on this earth walk, and that's my body. And so what keeps my body well? It's the antiretrovirals. It's all about balance.
HIV is a teacher somehow. And we need to start looking at why we're still here as Indigenous people. What is it? Is it we carry strong medicine? So let's look at that. Let's look at what that strong medicine is. And let's use it in living with HIV.
There's people that have been living with HIV longer than 27 years that I look up to and I respect, and they were activists long before me. But there's generations coming in, people newly living with HIV, and they need us, who've been around for a while, show that we're alive, and we're healthy, and we're happy.
I became involved in the HIV movement in the first year of my diagnosis. I am a peer mentor, a support person. When I do these things for my community and for my family, I feel good about it myself. It makes me continue to want to walk this way of life and to continue to help.
When I was a public speaker in Northern Quebec and Angava Bay, I would always tell young ones to be careful and play it safe. We have one life and we need to live it.
In living with HIV, am I going to neglect this? Or am I going to embrace it and accept it and run with it?
Our love is very strong. It's part of who we are and our responsibilities, and to help you go down the right path.
It's all about love, loving yourself, and be positive and live well. It's part of my journey. I live with HIV, but I'm not HIV. And you hear that a lot when people say, I'm HIV. And I quite often will say, no, you're not. And I'll name them, but you're living with that. That's where I'm at now in my journey. I'm in a really healthy place.
I love my life. I love what I'm doing. So I'm happy. I never knew what was HIV and AIDS until I was diagnosed.
I got diagnosed at the AIDS stage.
He was very kind when he came and told me, I'm sorry, I have to break this news to you.
When I found out, they told me over the phone, which you're not supposed to do.
It was like a life-changing moment for me.
Got this tunnel vision, and I had to look at the world through this tiny little pinhole, like a ghost, like I was a ghost, like I wasn't really there.
I just don't want to accept it right, in my mind that I was HIV positive.
It was hard at the beginning for me to accept the virus that I had.
Back in the mid-'80s, I heard the cases of AIDS happening. I was very scared.
The only way that I knew how to deal with that was through substance abuse. And so that was my journey for a few years after my diagnosis.
I hid it for a while. I got really ill, and that's where my journey began.
The doctor and spiritual people, healing people would tell me about this, and I understand more and more.
Medication is helping people survive and live healthy, long lives. It came a long way.
I felt so alone when I was first diagnosed and scared. I began praying out to my Creator and say, I have nobody that can help me right now. Only you. My spirit eyes were opened and I was able to see my future, but I also was able to see the pitfalls, the dangerous places that I walked, that I journeyed through, that brought me to that diagnosis that I hadn't seen when I was in that journey. It was that kind of moment. The prayers really helped.
I really believe it's that spiritual sickness that I isolated and that I kept in the dark that really drove me into a really dangerous lifestyle, which would eventually lead to an HIV diagnosis.
He asked me if I had any family there, and I said, I don't have anybody. He didn't leave me just hanging like, oh, you're positive and walk away. He came back and he got me. And he sat down with me and we had lunch and we talked, and he was really apologetic. I was grateful that he was, he didn't just kick me to the curb.
We need to look at it in a very holistic approach. Maybe dig a little more deep and not just treat the symptoms. We're very familiar with the trauma. We all are as Indigenous people. Let's look for the wellness. Let's look for the health, and let's do it together.
A lot of our people in my community are scared of the stigma of being tested positive.
We've found a lot of answers, and we've created a lot of tools to help people.
If you don't get tested and you wait too long, that might be too late. Your life could be ending pretty quick.
Get tested for HIV, because if you don't know you have HIV, what you don't know can kill you.
Getting tested and getting on treatment will save your life. There is nothing wrong with being HIV positive. I've accepted it. To me, it's like a chronic illness. It can be controlled, and we can live very, very long lives, just like the average person.
And the treatment is better these days.
So ARVs, antiretrovirals, what the ARVs do is they stop the virus in my body from replicating itself so that my white blood cell count can go up, which is my CD4 count. So it actually brought me down to an undetectable viral load where I'm not infectious. So the doctors promised me that if I adhere to my medication, that the longevity of my life should be that of any other average human being, so long as I take good care of myself.
I think it's very important that everybody be on medication as soon as they get their positive results, rather than wait, because I see the effects of that happening where I live, where people are not being put on medication straight away, and then they are either in the hospital a lot of times, or then they end up dying.
I know that the baseline is my ARVs and what's keeping me alive.
We've come a long way. In 1990, I tested positive for HIV. At that time, there were no real effective medications for HIV. I got pretty sick. It was the same time when they came out with these new medications. And these drug cocktails literally saved my life. I got up off of my deathbed and I went back to work. But in the early days, the medications were really hard on me.
I remember learning about how hard the medication was in the early 90s.
Waking up at 4 a.m, having a little food, and then taking medications when I already felt like I was going to throw up. But it's different now. We know a lot more about HIV. We know that the medications worked.
I guess I would be called one of the newer generation of HIV diagnosis. I was only put on 1 pill a day. There's very little side effects.
I switched to the new medications and I'm fine. I don't have any side effects.
I'm doing well. The medication is really doing what it's supposed to do. I'm just, trying to get my life back.
My health kind of bounced back because of the treatment.
So the HIV is no longer affecting me physically. My immune system is stronger than it's ever been. I'm probably the healthiest I've ever been since I was a child. I started the medication. I became undetectable within 3 months' time. So I went from a viral load of, over 200,000 to under 40 copies. It was such a huge relief knowing that the HIV was no longer affecting my body. that I couldn't transmit it to other people sexually, and that my immune system was no longer under attack. Because when we don't know our diagnosis, it's putting people at risk for contracting HIV. So when we get tested, we're not only respecting ourselves, but respecting the other people that we're engaging with sexually. So that is actually HIV prevention. It's happening in the movement right now. Getting people tested, getting them diagnosed, getting them on treatment so that they're no longer passing on the virus. HIV prevention.
The time I wake up, I have my breakfast, and then I take my meds. So I got used to it.
It's not too bad as long as I remember. So different people have different ways of remembering. Every time at lunch, I just know that this is part of my lunch. I take them out middle of anywhere, a restaurant, and, at a friend's house. And if you don't want anybody to know, you just say, yeah, these are my vitamins.
It was a little challenging. Am I going to be able to take this daily?
It was hard. I just couldn't keep up with my meds.
I was really unstable, and I just wasn't sure if I would be able to adhere to the scheduling of the pills in order for them to be effective.
I spent the first, 2 years maybe, struggling and changing medications since 1996. So it's been a lot of different pills I've tried.
It was hard at the beginning because I kind of pushed it away. I'm tired of it. I'm fed up with it. I'm enough with this. I was not used to taking it every day. I was down to 79 pounds at one point because I wasn't taking my meds. But I fought. I kept going and continued. So I felt better.
Figured out that taking my medication at nighttime while I sleep helps me, and I don't really get so much side effects as what I used to.
At the beginning it was hard, but now it's smooth.
Well, there might be some side effects, but I feel a lot better, and I feel more comfortable. I feel really good.
It's really important for me to adhere to my medication, to take my medication daily.
It's very important to take the meds because if you're not taking them, you end up in the hospital.
If I don't take my ARVs every day, the HIV will build resistance to them. They'll stop working. Once they stop working, they're going to have to reassess a different regimen of medication in order to combat the resistance.
I went off my treatment. I was hospitalized for 3 months. I lost my mobility. I would not recommend a drug holiday to anybody.
At one time, I did take a holiday in 2008, and for me, that was a bad decision. I ended up in the hospital almost dying.
Some of my peers that had taken drug holidays and nothing happened. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to take a drug holiday, and shit happened. Whatever was happening came on just like that. And all of a sudden, I couldn't walk. And I was in a lot of pain. And they ran all kinds of tests, and some of them were very invasive. I was really sick. I think I had a bit of dementia as well, because there's parts of it I don't remember. They restarted my treatments when I was in the hospital. They tried 3 different treatments, and none of them worked. And the 4th one, they said, let's try this one, but your choices are getting limited. But I got better. I relearned how to walk. The treatment is important. They're good. They're keeping us alive. There's life there, but there's still side effects. We can live with them.
It's way more than the meds. Because after I started taking the medications, I got really depressed. Even though I started to feel physically better, I couldn't understand My mom always told me everything happens for a reason, so what the hell's going on? Why did this happen? And I still felt like I was gonna die. Even though I was taking the meds, I wasn't convinced. I didn't believe any of the messages because I felt like I'd been lied to a lot in my life. And he said, you know, you need to make some plans. What are you gonna do now that you're gonna live forever? And that's when the first time when anybody ever said that to me, that you're gonna live. And it gave me a little tiny little seed of hope.
It's been really interesting in the support that I've had throughout my journey. And it was the HIV that really needed to be embraced and accepted. And once I was able to do that, I became that helping hand that I always wanted to become.
There's advantages to having the doctor in the same building where you see your support worker and stuff, because it's all there. You got your pharmacy, your doctor, and your support people.
I have a good relationship with my HIV specialist doctor. When there's something bothering me, I can talk to her about it. I can ask questions. She showed a very compassionate side of her. She would tell me that, you know, being an IV drug user, that could be your last time you get high, and that always stuck in me. I don't want to ever go back to that life. And to me, she was such a positive, encouraging person that, you know, I didn't want to let her down. And I found inside of myself to climb out of that hole and try and live a better life.
Oh, it's like family, and it just feels so great that you could share, you know, how you feel or how's your day going. It's opened, you know, you don't have to feel ashamed or worried about it. You feel so comfortable. It's just like one of your relatives. And that's what I think about my people and peers that are there. They're like a family.
Through all my struggles, through all my pain, I hang on to my strength, my inner power, and to keep looking forward. Don't stop thinking that there's nothing there for you, that there's people who love you out there and that care. And there are supports out there if you can find them and if you choose to look for them. And not to give up hope.
I wasn't aware that a lot of our people were being impacted by this. So I needed to find a place, actually, to understand how to live with HIV and how to journey with it.
I think that when I have all of those things in balance, it's like I can really grow and strive as a young Indigenous person.
To help yourself and to treat yourself with love and respect and honor yourself, honor your body, and honor your spirit.
When I was diagnosed, I was like out of the world, lost and confused and don't know where to go to. I was sad, I was lonely, I was depressed, I was suicidal, I was almost like everything in the dark. I switched. The spiritual people, the healing people, they brought light in my life. They brought my life back down to earth.
Culture, that's part of us Native people. And this is where we get our strength from.
People living with HIV/AIDS or any illness for that matter, they need their meds, absolutely. But they also need to keep their spirituality, to keep their spirit alive.
People who are struggling with life, they need to learn their culture and to see who they are and to become that person that they need to become.
For me, I'm very proud to be here, proud to be a survivor, learning new tools, meeting new people, getting the knowledge and support. And I'm gonna probably share a lot of stories and knowledge.
I do a lot of walking. I can walk miles. I had to tell a story about how it is for me to live in the city and to go back to the bush. This is me trying to be an Indian. So I go home, I visit my sister, and she's got a fire burning nice and hot, and she's got geese on the ground, and she's plucking one. She says to me, don't just stand there, pick up that goose and go throw him in the fire. So I do. I go walk over to the fire, I toss the goose in the fire, and I walk back. And my sister turns around, goes, what'd you do with the goose? And I says to her, I threw it in the fire. She goes running over there, grabs the goose, comes running back. You're not supposed to throw the whole bird in the fire. So she picks it up and she shows me, she holds it up and she says, you gotta do it like this. And I went, oh, okay. So I learned that day, you don't throw the whole bird in the fire. You're only supposed to burn the little feathers.
We have a challenge, be positive and be strong and healthy. My message of hope would be stay positive. Learn your teachings from your elders. Try to gain your strength and your history, who you are. Listen, they'll take you a long ways. They'll help you and then you can pass it on to your children and then your grandkids. Because one day you'll be an elder too.
It opened up my sweat lodge. If anyone wanted to do sweat lodge, the lodge was there and they were welcome to come and do sweat. There were so many who came to me and said, well, you're going to let us in your lodge? Whether we're HIV positive or we have full-blown AIDS or we're trans or whatever. Yeah. And then they talked to me about how there were so many who won't let them in the lodge. In the circle, so many are still afraid of the disease, still afraid of the contact. I know I'm not going to catch AIDS in the sweat lodge. I know I'm not going to catch AIDS if I hug you. And you're very welcome in my lodge. I explained how I was also afraid many years ago. We will be learning until the day we die.
I smudge, I go to sweats, I participate in dances, round dances, and that for me is helping me and living a longer life and a happier life than what I was before.
I love sweat lodges too. First sweat lodge I went to, I think I cowered probably halfway through the first round. It was the second time I went in. I stayed in there for the whole 4 rounds. I really enjoyed it. I came out just nice and relaxed. I said my prayers in there.
It was a Cree sweat lodge, and it was really, really powerful. You know, I had been suffering from addiction for probably about 15 years at that time. And so I had a lot of inner turmoil going on. And when I went in there, they were putting different medicines on the grandfathers, and they had drums and rattles and their powwow voices. And it was just like all of these things started to tremble inside of me.
Creator gave us all gifts. We have medicine, we have strong medicine, and that's why we're still here.
This is my story.
Nin mandan de bendan de bachamon. This is my story.
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 This is my story, and this is who I am.
For you doing ba? So hi, my name is Nichole. I am volunteering here with Positive Living Niagara, and we just watched that strong medicine video. And with us today, we have Trevor Stratton. If you wanted to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I'm First Nations from Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nation, and Niagara is my traditional territory in Toronto. It's also a traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, or the Six Nations of the Grand River as well. I work for the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network as their coordinator of the International Indigenous Working Group on HIV and AIDS, and I've been living with HIV for 30 years now. Wow. Can't believe it's been that long. Holy.
Yeah. And to think that there's been so many changes with HIV in the last 30 years since you were diagnosed. You were talking in the film about medication back then and how it was different from now. And I was just kind of wondering if you could go in more detail about kind of that thing.
Well, in the very early days, I mean, I was diagnosed in 1990. And around that time, we didn't have any antiretrovirals. There was no such thing as a drug cocktail. It hadn't been invented yet. So basically you got HIV, you got pretty sick and tried some experimental drugs, and eventually you would die of AIDS-related illnesses. Then, I actually resisted going on the meds until I was really sick. And it was my son and my wife at the time who convinced me that I was in denial and I was actually dying. And if you don't get on the meds, then you're gonna be dead. Don't be dead, Dad. So that really got to me. But when I started taking the meds, they were pretty toxic. I mean, I could feel it. And I there were some of my friends were taking medications every 4 hours. So they would have to wake up in the middle of the night and eat a bunch of food and take some pills and drink them down when they already felt nauseous. And it's hard to take pills that are making you nauseous, really nauseous. You can get lots of diarrhea and take them knowing that they're saving your life, but they're causing you all this discomfort. So I actually had diarrhea for 3 years. If you can imagine what kind of a quality of life I had, but it was a trade-off. I mean, side effects or death. That's what the choice was. And, one of the medications, the coating on the outside of the gel became unstable and they had to offer it only in liquid form. So I'd have to pour it out and measure it out, and it tasted like metal or something. It tasted very metallic, and I just felt it all through my body. It was quite hard. But most of us just did what we had to do because we were looking at death. The alternative was death.
Were you a part of the trials, or was this just the medication that was given to everyone?
Yeah, no, I was never part of any trials. I actually avoided doctors because, you know, in 1990, they told me you might live for 2 years, but your quality of life won't be very good. And it wasn't for about 7 years before I started to feel fatigue and, you know, started to get itchy head and skin things and stuff on my gums. And I started to get quite sick there. But by the time, it was 1996 when in Vancouver during the International AIDS Conference, when they announced the new antiretroviral cocktails. But it took me 2 years to get on those medications. And those first line medications were still quite toxic. We've come such a long way. I have no side effects with the stuff I take now.
Yeah. And for most people, usually it's like 1 or 2 pills. And so like the difference between the two, like it's obviously night and day. And I think a lot of people don't realize too, is that with taking the medication, they can become undetectable, right?
Yeah.
And it's so much easier, I'm assuming, with the new pills now than it is with those pills back then to adhere to the medication.
Yeah, and that's so important that you bring up the undetectable thing because, you know, we're still obliged to disclose our HIV status, even if we have an undetectable viral load. And we know that you can't pass HIV sexually if you know, you have under 50 parts per million, which is called undetectable. It's undetectable in your bloodstream. We know that. And yet you can be charged and convicted and sent to jail for not disclosing. The only way they say you don't have to disclose if you wear a condom and you have an undetectable viral load.
Yeah.
So that's like wearing a belt and suspenders at the same time. One, you know, you only need one. The other one is redundant. It's a redundancy. It's a criminalizing being HIV positive, you know. It's basically
criminalizing being sick.
It doesn't follow the science. It's not logical. It's about the stigma. That's why it's happening.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And with the undetectable, there was that U=U campaign, which I think did a great job in kind of getting the information out there.
Well, it's liberating, right? Because, well, I'm 55 right now. Maybe I don't have to worry as much, but the young people living with HIV don't have to feel like they're a vector of disease. Like everyone has to be afraid. Oh, I'm terrified of my own bodily fluids. They don't have to think like that anymore. Yeah. They can have normal relationships and you know,
and long lives too.
Yeah.
Like the life expectancy is 70 years after diagnosis or something like that. I'm bad at math.
Yeah, pretty much almost the same as anybody else, right?
Exactly.
But you still have to worry about all the other sexually transmitted infections, right? They're still out there. So
they're
still an issue, right?
Yeah, you still have to, you know, use a condom and protect yourself from other things like syphilis and HPV and those kinds of things.
But it's another tool, right? It's another tool in our tool belt. We had condoms and that was just about all we had, or abstinence. Now we have all these other choices, you know?
Like PrEP. Like PrEP is huge now.
Yeah.
In Niagara, there's that new PrEP clinic with Niagara Falls CHC and Positive Living Niagara.
Yeah.
And PrEP is like a great preventative for a lot of people.
And my understanding is that new infections are actually starting to go down. They were going up, and now I think it's because of PrEP.
Yeah, and the accessibility.
Yeah, and home testing's coming. People will be able to test themselves. Imagine our people on reserves or isolated rural communities. They don't have to travel or mail stuff in. They can just do it. I'm just a little worried about the counseling part, right?
Yeah, like the pre and post counseling for people, and like,
but they're coming up with ways.
Yeah, virtual is all the rage now because of COVID. That adds a whole nother level of accessibility issues.
And then there's injectables coming up too. Instead of having to remember to take my medications, pretty soon I'll be able to take the option of an injection, which is like a slow release over weeks, and I don't have to worry every day about it. And that may help people to adhere and be able to maintain that undetectable viral load that we talked about.
It's so amazing to hear that from the 90s to now, we went from like a huge array of medication that you had to take every 4 hours to like a needle once every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And the change in science has just been like phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's taken this long, eh? And with COVID, we're having a vaccine within a year. That's incredible. It's like magic. What the heck?
Yeah. It's amazing what will happen when people put their minds together and they have a cause. And the
why didn't that happen for HIV though?
Oh, because of stigma.
Right, exactly. And the activities that lead to getting HIV, many of those are stigmatized, right? Gay sex, gay sex, stigma.
Drug use and things, So getting rid of that stigma really does move things forward and gets vaccine out quicker.
I guess so. I don't see people being criminalized for passing COVID. Even though you can die, like you die a lot faster with COVID than you will with HIV, I'll tell you that.
And we don't know the long-term effects either with COVID yet, right? So there are people with complications that are starting to come up. And but
I think it's about the information that people are getting, right? If you get the right information, then you can make a decision based on science instead of rumor or stigma or something your friend dreamt up last night, you know? And Indigenous people tend to get our information from people we know and trust. And so if it's coming from a source, like if it's a non-Indigenous source using English in a different way than we're used to, or French, or, you know, it's not in our Indigenous language. When we have the messaging in our own language, told by our own people to us and people we trust, like grandma, that makes a big difference. And so that's why it's so important that our response is culturally appropriate, or at least culturally safe at the very least. People aren't going to get hurt by just trying to come in and get a test and then not treated very respectfully, or people are afraid of them. And you know, that's part of what Indigenous people are up against as well. And for, you know, you saw the people in the film, they talked about their struggles in testing, in going on the treatment and then on adhering to the treatment.
And I think that's one of the great things about this at-home kit that's going to be coming out. And being able to get into the communities, especially the northern communities, and be advocated by people locally there. I think that could be a really great tool to get tested, and to have the peer support as well, with the counseling and post-counseling or pre-counseling with the tests.
And of course, Indigenous people, I mean, biologically, we get HIV the same way any other human being does, but our lives are different. And many of our lives are very different than the way mainstream Canadians experience their lives or walk through life, right? We live in isolated communities. We've gone through hundreds of years of assimilation, residential schools, and this has caused multi-generational trauma. And even though I didn't go to residential school, my grandmother did. And, you know, and that's where you learn to parent usually, is by how your parents did it. And if you go to residential school, and people don't have that. They were raised in an institutional way, which actually is better at preparing you for prison, another institution, very much like residential schools, than it would be for being a doctor, a lawyer, or somebody that, you know, that reaches the higher classes. Because assimilation was never meant, they were never trying to assimilate us to become doctors and lawyers. It was to become something else. Something lower.
And everyone, every single person is affected by the residential schools in our community, even if you don't think you are. I was just having a conversation the other day with a coworker about this, and how the intergenerational trauma starts to pop up later in life, and especially when it comes to youth. They don't think that they're having intergenerational trauma, but here they are in the mental health system. And
If they're lucky.
yeah, if they're lucky.
Right.
And yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's something that definitely needs to be looked at further, and definitely something we need to support our community with.
Well, I actually speak really openly about the different times that I've sought out counseling, because I want to normalize it. Because, you know, if you break your arm, you go to a helper, a physical helper, someone that helps your physical body. If we're having issues with Creator, we go to a spiritual helper, like a priest or an elder or a sweat lodge keeper, you know, somebody that can help guide you through the difficulties of the spiritual health. But there's such a stigma around the mental helpers, right? The mental help that you can get. So when I found out that I was, when I tested positive in 1990, I remember at the clinic, they said, you know, everybody that newly tests positive, we ask them if they'd like to see a counselor. And even if you aren't really into it, if you would just please, just even come and see them just for 5 or 10 minutes to see if it's a fit for you. We ask that of you. And I decided to do that, even though I was just angry, right? I was so angry. I was like, screw you, I don't need anybody. But I did it because my head talked to my heart, you know, and I guess my head won. My heart didn't want to do it. But I realized I liked the person. And and it really just helped me deal with it, even though I was still looking at certain death back then without any medications. It helped me. And then when I got sick with, when I developed AIDS in the late 90s, I went to counseling again. After I took my medications, I started to get better. But spiritually and emotionally, I was feeling like crap. I was down, I was depressed. And I went to a gathering by the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network. And it changed my life. And I've heard that from other people too that are living positive. When they come together at an organization, that organization is probably not the right word, community, right? That's the word. I realize there's a bunch of people similar to me, going through similar things that I am, that are working together to try to respond to this, to try to do something, to try to do it better. And even that psychic energy of knowing those people are out there makes me feel good. And I wanted to be a part of it. And that's what inspired me to become an HIV activist, is the Indigenous family that I joined. It gave me all about meaning.
It's all about that holistic care, right? And supporting people from every single direction, because you can't just get counseling, you need the supports there. And whether you find it in different organizations or communities or family, like, it's so important that you have someone there to be with you during difficult times.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that way. I remember asking my mother, you know, I've been asked to go speak on our reserve, Mom. Is that okay? Will it be an embarrassment? Will it shame the family? And she said, I'm very proud of you, and I support you in this. And that made a huge difference to me. And then when I went and spoke in my community, the elders lined up with their arms crossed, you know, like this. I thought, oh God, here we go. And each one of them gave me a big hug and told me how brave I was. And so I knew I had my community behind me as well. And that's still with me. I know my ancestors are with me doing this work. And I try to share that with others so they can find their truth, right? I can't heal anybody. I'm a healer only because I can heal myself. That's what a healer is, I think. So if you meet someone who is on a healing journey, it rubs off. It feels good. And you're like, geez, I want to do that. That looks fun. That looks great. Look how happy they are, or how, I don't know, they're just experiencing life the way it is and not trying to block anything out. They're dealing with it straight on. And that's what I wanted when I met people on a healing journey. And I like to think I'm on a journey, you know, not there yet maybe, but it's about the journey maybe, not the destination, right?
Yeah, definitely is.
Yeah.
You know, I think that everyone's journey is so different, and it's so true about like just seeing you kind of beam up and get all excited about talking about your journey makes me want to go on like my own healing journey a bit myself, right?
Well, maybe you already are.
Yeah.
I see a lot of happiness in your face.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's I still, you know, everybody in the film, we are still like this family. And when we see each other, say, hi, movie star, hi, you know, and it just feels good to check in with people and to know that most of us are climbing the mountain, you know, doing a good job. We're not falling back down the mountain. You know, it's easier to stay on the mountain than to fall down and climb back up. And that's true with the medications. If somebody decides, oh, I can't do this anymore, and they stop taking the medication, what happens is that all the progress you made climbing the mountain, your health, you lose some of it. You start falling backwards, and it's easier to stay on the medication and stay high on the hill, high on the mountain, than it is to go off the medications, fall down, and then climb back up. Because the fact is, you don't actually climb all the way back up to where you were.
Yeah.
So it's, and going on a drug holiday or not stopping to take your meds, it's a matter of luck. It's like playing with fire. It's luck. You could get a brain infection and then have cognitive problems for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You know,
your HIV could become drug resistant, and you have to figure out a whole new system, right? So you might never get back to where you were before when you were healthy, before you went on your drug holidays. And it is all about luck. You always hear about these people talking about like, oh yeah, I did it, I'm fine. And then you hear about these other stories that are just so horrific, and it's not worth it to me. You know?
And I remember there was a guy, he was like, hey, let's you and I get together. Let's hook up, you know, let's have a little booty call. And I'm like, well, I'm HIV positive, you know. And he's like, well, I'm not, but I can't believe, I'm so surprised that I didn't get HIV because I took so many risks. And when we talked, as it turned out, it seemed like he took more risks than I took. And yet I got HIV, he didn't. It really is the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
I mean,
when it comes to those risky behaviors.
Yeah. It only takes once.
Yeah. You know, there's so many people out there that that they thought they weren't going to have it. They had low risk factors, and then they get tested, and then they find out, oh no, like I have HIV. I don't even know where or when or how.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons too why counseling is so important when it comes to that part, because sometimes you don't know, and you'll never know.
Yeah, and some people are afraid of taking the test. If even there's stigma around even getting tested, right? Why do you need to get tested? Well, because I'm a human being, and it's the H in HIV stands for human.
Yeah.
So, you know, so maybe I did make a mistake. Maybe I took some risks. Maybe I really should get tested. And the thing is, the only way to know if you're HIV positive is to get tested. When a doctor comes to you and says, you are HIV positive, that's the only way to know.
Yeah.
And there is no cure. Yeah. But there's a functional cure. If you take your meds, you can live a long, healthy life. And that's what the film's really about. Because Indigenous people are still dying of AIDS, even now with all the tools we have. Or many are not achieving an undetectable viral load. Many a lot of the information that's getting to our people is not correct, is incorrect, it's wrong.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I see that my cousin who was injecting drugs got HIV and then she died of AIDS, it's hard for me to believe that AIDS isn't a death sentence. But it isn't. The fact is that that person may not have been able to maintain an undetectable viral load, and the virus kept growing and growing, and they died. And you will die of HIV if you don't go on the medication. So that's what the film is about, because over so many centuries, Indigenous people, not all, but many, don't trust. They have a lack of trust, not just for the government, but for information in general. And you see all this fake news is everywhere, right? And nobody knows what to believe anymore. So this is why we decided that it's really important to have this video that is culturally something that Indigenous people can identify with. And they hear from people living with HIV straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
You know, the real stories, not fake news.
Yeah. And there's real reason why people don't believe the government, especially in our communities. Like there's definitely real reason why you wouldn't want to. So that peer education is so important, and that sharing of knowledge, right, is just so vital to getting that information out there and to getting the right information out there.
It's like nothing about us without us, right? So for any group, I mean, let's say you want to organize a women's conference or a women's gathering. You don't get a bunch of all men around the table for your planning committee.
Yeah.
Well, that would be really dumb. So why would a bunch of non-Aboriginal people sit around and plan a meeting or a conference for Indigenous people? It needs to be us.
Yeah.
And even I can go even further, and it's about Indigenous people living with HIV. There's nothing about us without us. I want to be at the table.
Yeah.
Because we have something called, the GIPA principle, GIPA. And that's the greater involvement of people living with HIV and AIDS. And it's an old way of doing things. And we knocked on the doors, because in the early days, the scientists and the politicians were talking about how can we protect ourselves from these people with HIV. We need to isolate this and then stamp it out. And we were like, wait a minute. What about people living with HIV? What about care, treatment, and support? Why aren't you talking about that? Let us in.
Yeah.
And they did eventually. And we are at the seat, and we demanded that GIPA is a central principle around the AIDS response. Nothing about us without us is so important.
It really is. Like there are different life experiences that people with HIV have, of course, that people without HIV will never experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so important that everyone's there at the table.
And it's important that if you do find yourself at the table, that you're not really speaking for yourself per se. You're speaking for like you say, the diversity of people living with HIV.
Yeah.
So I for 11 years, I was the liaison for Indigenous people living with HIV at the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network. And once a year, we'd have a big caucus meeting of 50 of us. We'd get together and talk about and create resolutions asking the organization, the community, for these are what we want. This is our wish list. This is what we want you to do with us and for us, right? So it's magical when people living with HIV get together. The stigma goes away. It's very strange.
Yeah.
It's a safe room. It's a safe space. Yeah.
It's great. You know, I think everyone needs that safe space, right?
Yeah, and I think the AIDS service organizations, I mean, if they're doing it right, they know that too.
Yeah.
And it's asking people, what do you need? What are your needs? That's so important, you know, and that harm reduction approach and figuring out, walking with people long enough that you you start to realize, that's where you're at. Okay, let's start here.
Yeah.
Rather than you trying to be like me, let's start where you're at.
Yeah.
My values and my morals aren't important here. What's important is that you get services that you need. You get things that you need to help you live a healthy life. So if a service provider is sitting there, and you have to work your way through and prove that you're like them, or you're a valuable human being, or that's not the way it should be done. I mean, if they're doing things you wouldn't do, that's not the point. The point is that I'm a service provider. It's my job to figure out how to provide services in a way that is going to help you. Yeah. And I see, I see your organization doing that quite well. Positive Living Niagara is doing a darn good job in this region.
They have a lot of peer programs. They're really pushing for it. So whether it's individuals who are currently using, or individuals with HIV, they used to have a youth peer group, just something that's still in the works. So they have really pushed the idea of having peers, educating peers, and peers getting their voices heard in different walks of life to kind of direct where they're going to go. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Again, nothing about us without us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And overall, I just get the sense that, as you get older, you get more experienced and you become more professional and you have a lot of knowledge. And so though it's older people who tend to be in positions of power and developing policy. But if we're not talking with our youth, then we're talking in a way that they're not understanding, or they don't want to listen because we're speaking like in a totally different generational way.
Yeah.
And the messaging, I feel that we all over Canada, we need to do a lot better job at engaging youth and putting out the messaging and the services in a way that youth want them, or youth will accept them or take it up,
Yeah.
And then we would see less youth getting HIV because, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Is that young people are getting HIV, and it's easier now, but it's still no fun with the stigma and discrimination and having to take these pills. It's not the greatest. I mean, it's a lot better than it was. And that's that's part of the messaging from the film Strong Medicine as well, is about we've come a long way. That's a message around the medications and the services and our understanding of HIV. We have come a long way. And in fact, we've learned so much that a lot of these things we've learned are being applied to today's pandemic, the new pandemic, COVID-19.
Yeah.
We need a people's vaccine.
Yeah.
So that everybody can get vaccinated so we can get rid of COVID.
And taking care of our vulnerable people seems to be a huge push with this, with COVID-19 versus like the HIV pandemic back in the 80s. It was more about secluding, where here I feel like it's a lot more about protecting our vulnerable populations.
And it takes political will to do that.
Yeah.
So you see what happens when elected leaders politicize a pandemic. That happened with HIV. In many countries, they don't want to deal with men who have sex with men. They say it doesn't happen here, it's unnatural, it's criminalized.
Yeah.
Sex work is criminalized. So if you push people underground, it's much more difficult to reach them with safer sex messaging or the guidelines around staying safe in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. And so more than 35 years on, or 40 almost, right? And for HIV, still, I mean, how many millions of people are not on treatment in the world? We have all the tools to end HIV. We could do it now. We don't have the political will.
Yeah. Yeah, that is something that definitely needs to still be advocated for all across the world.
Yeah.
So, which
Working
I feel like you're
internationally.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that internationally. How the differences, the ways that governments respond make a huge difference. And in Africa, West and Central Africa, HIV cases are going down, and in Central Europe and Asia, they're going up. So, geez, where we're gaining in one space and we're losing in another space.
Yeah, especially with technology the way it is and how it's improving, and testing's improving and prevention's improving, and we have all these great advances in our science. So
yeah, we can do it. It really takes a mind shift, right? And really it's about love. I mean, how can we think of a whole sector of the population as being somehow subhuman or undeserving of life or a good quality of life? They asked for it. They brought it on themselves.
Yeah.
That's like, they could say that about COVID too. I've heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't wear a mask, they deserve to die. I don't subscribe to that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think we all deserve to live, and that we all need to work together to protect each other.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to get out of this pandemic. And I don't think COVID's going to go away. The common cold is a COVID.
Yeah.
It's still here. We got medications for it and stuff, but we're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to deal with it together. But we're also, this whole statement around we're all in this together. No. Some of us are in luxury yachts, and others are clinging to a floating log.
Yeah.
That's going down and it's getting more and more soaked with water. We're not all in this together. It depends on privilege, and it depends on classism. And that's what HIV is, responding to a pandemic. The pandemic, both pandemics have really exposed the cracks in our social safety nets. The countries with a social safety net are doing better, but it really strains it, and the cracks that are there become wider and they become much more obvious. And our old folks' homes are a very good example of what's wrong with our health system. They're not doing it right.
Yeah.
We
and
can do better.
You were saying that everyone deserves love. And I think that is something that we all need to remind ourselves and each other, especially during this pandemic with COVID, because it's so easy to fall into the blaming and the hating and for a virus. And so I think talking about love and kind of staying on that grandfather teaching is so important during this time, right? So.
And that's what harm reduction is. When you're starting where someone's at, that's love. Harm reduction is about love.
Yeah.
It's a great theme for World AIDS Day. Maybe maybe next year it should just be simply love.
Yeah.
Or Aboriginal AIDS Awareness Week. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that about wraps up our time, though. And I think ending on love is a really great way to kind of end this interview. So yeah, thank you for coming and spending time and chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you too, Nichole. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you well. I know you're volunteering for this, and I hope I get to meet you again in person someday real soon.
Yeah, I hope meeting in person happens soon. I miss people.
I do too. I'm a bit of an introvert, but I've had enough.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm ready to hug again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a hug, touching hug. This is. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, now I want to just express my gratitudes for Trevor sharing, especially from his journey, and sharing that amongst everybody and putting that message out there. And I say now too for Nichole for being that voice as well. And so I guess one of the things that we can look at is that in reviewing that film, that it is that strong medicine. And our mind is one of the biggest medicines that we can have. Our vessel, our body, we can carry a lot of things with it. But I think that mind, when talking about what we can do with it, and even to help not only change perspectives on things, but also to put those good messages out there so that we're able to recognize and to know where we are on this journey, and that we are here together with this journey. And we can be that good support for each other, which was mentioned and which is needed, not only when some are suffering, but just to be there for each other, even in the best of times. And when we have these things together, we can move mountains. And it is those things that Trevor mentioned that we need to look at. We need to support for continuing this change that we need in our communities. And we offer our gratitudes, and we say nyawa to our ancestors, those that have joined us on this mission, but also that walk beside each and every one of us on a regular basis to help us. And it's that reminder for us to look at those messages. Watch out for those messages that are there for us, that come to us, and that help not only us on our journey, but helping us to help others on that journey as well. And so for all of those elements within our culture, with our songs, our sacred items, and our good medicines, we offer them up with our humble gratitude that the Creator, Songwe and Nichole, takes care of everything. And that love amongst us, that Ganolunkwa, when we're able to offer that love, we know for sure that that's a good, strong energy, that good, strong medicine as well. So with all of these, with our minds together, we offer our gratitudes and say nyawa. Donna.
Hi, my name is Tina, and we're the Butterfly Spirit drummers. And this is Sabrina to my right, Cherie to her right, and Miss Josie to my left. We are grateful to be here and honored. And we are going to sing some healing songs as well as some high-vibing, uplifting music for you.
And Cherie suggested that I start with the smudge for you. So if you just want to close your eyes and just take a deep breath in and let it go. Another deep breath in. And let it go. And one more big breath in, filling up your chest, your lungs, and your belly. And let it go. Okay, and Cherie, this is the first one. The first one. Your song?
Sure.
Okay. Could you just this way?
Yeah. So this song here came from Mother Earth, and it's called the Health Healing Song. So we just want to send all that love and that healing out to you all, and you can continue to send it even further to maybe people that are in your thoughts and in your prayers also in the same language.
And that song Cherie created when COVID first happened. So it's a beautiful healing song. How'd you like that? Okay, and the next one would be, so we have unity, believe, wildflower. Can you start wildflower? Sure. Can we talk about it? Anybody?
Well, I know the meaning for it, about the wildflowers growing and in the residential schools, like when the children went to residential schools, the wildflowers died, and then when the children returned home, the wildflowers started growing again. For me, I honor the survivors, my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, who were all in residential school, who made it and are alive today to speak about what they went through in the residential schools. And I honor the ones that have passed on when I sing this song.
We'll go, you start, I'll go that way, okay? Can you sing that
Hey,
So this one came to me, and I like just to share that with that word believe, it's very powerful. So if we believe we can do something, we can. And if we believe we can't, then we can't. Belief is very powerful. And you can close your eyes when we sing this one and then just like use it as a meditation if you want to believe in healing and wellness, or to pray for somebody, or believe the light at the end of the tunnel of COVID. And you know, it is temporary. It's a temporary thing. And I really like Grandmother Renee and what she shared today. And so we'll sing that. Beautiful. And our last one is unity. I'm just gonna switch drums. I was really feeling that one.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty. Is it the aim song? Yeah. So we'll just do like.
I love you guys.
Is it more than the lead? Okay, we'll just do one each. Hi. Yes.
That concludes our Aboriginal AIDS Awareness virtual gathering. Thank you to everyone who made this event possible. Thank you to Jackie Labonte, Trevor Stratton, Nichole Lidondel, and to our drummers, Josie, Tina, Sabrina, and Cherie. Thank you so much for your time and your heart. Have a good night. Thank you for joining us.